The University of South Florida and RoomPact presents Res Ed 2.0, Innovative Engagement for Student Success and Academic Excellence.
Hi everybody, my name is Julie Leos. I'm the Director for Residential Education at the University of South Florida in Tampa, Florida. Welcome to Res Ed 2.0, a four-part webinar series dedicated to residential student success and academic excellence. You see, as scholar practitioners in a residential setting, we are called to share with others that our laser focus and commitment to student success is a part of a new understanding of what it means to educate as housing professionals. Some might call it a new approach or a new lens. A residential education goes beyond the constructs of a building, of a bed, of a lounge. You see, residential education is what remains when those things are no longer available to students and those things are no longer a part of their life. The learning they had, the commitment they made to themselves, the connections that they made with others, all of those things that are made possible because of educators like you. That is a residential education. Now, you might be here because you want to strengthen your residential curriculum. You might be here because you are wanting to strengthen your ties with faculty or other academic partners. You might want to also learn a little bit more about how to assess your program. Whatever the reason is that you are here today, we are so happy that you're here and glad that you chose this space, this community, to enhance those skills. Now, I can't wait to learn with you today, and with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to our series committee. Thank you.
The University of South Florida and RoomPact presents Res Ed 2.0, Innovative Engagement for Student Success and Academic Excellence.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Res Ed 2.0, Innovative Engagement for Student Success and Academic Excellence, live from the University of South Florida.
We are so glad you are able to join us virtually as we all navigate this new remote world together.
Now more than ever, our role as educators is so important. When planning the series to be remote, that was our guiding principle.
No matter where our students may be, we must do our best to support student success and academic excellence within residential education.
We hope that during your time with us today and throughout this series, you are able to learn new ways to enhance opportunities to foster student success within your institutions.
Although we can't meet in person, we hope that you are also able to connect with other professionals and share ideas throughout the stream.
Use the chat function to ask questions, comment on anything you hear today, and share your knowledge as an expert in the field.
Student success is a shared responsibility, and we hope that you discover something today that will help you on that journey.
You can find more information about upcoming presentations, the presenters themselves, and even the whole series found on our website here below.
We will also be recording and hosting the stream today thanks to our friends at RoomPact, and we would like to thank them for being a part of our team.
If you liked what you learned, share it with colleagues and come back for the rest of our programs.
So sit back, relax, and put on your favorite pair of professional attire sweatpants and enjoy today's live stream.
This is Res Ed 2.0, Innovative Engagement for Student Success and Academic Excellence.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I see you're writing your names as you pop into the chat, so I'll keep on doing that as you're popping in. My name is Melanie Freire. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'll be the moderator for this session today. So welcome to Res Ed 2.0, Innovative Engagement for Student Success and Academic Excellence, live from the University of South Florida. Go Bulls! We'll be talking about living learning programs today, and we have some awesome panelists joining us. So the first panelist is Chazman McKoy. She is a coordinator for academic initiatives here at the University of South Florida. Dylan Wilkes is a residence life coordinator at the University of Florida as well. He'll be joining us. And then we also have Dr. Lindsay Williams, Assistant Director of Recruitment and Retention and coordinator of the EduCare Living Learning Community with the College of Education at the University of South Florida. So panelists, feel free to pop in with your faces here. As we navigate this new and remote world together, we have a few housekeeping items to make sure that everything is good while we're going through the session. So we will be recording this session and hosting the stream today for our friends we are recording the sessions, and our friends at RoomPact are helping us host this stream. So a huge shout out to them, and thank you for doing this with us. It's really exciting, and we're happy that we're able to contribute to our field with you all and be here together. Feel free to use the chat function throughout to ask any questions, comment on anything that you might hear, and share knowledge that you might have. We all have different experiences, and we want to honor that and recognize that we're all learning here together, and we are not the sole holders of knowledge in this space. And I see some of you have already been using the chat function, so thank you for that. And then lastly, please keep your microphone muted to reduce any background noise. That's mainly for you all panelists to make sure that we can all hear each other and all those kinds of things. We will keep our eye on the chat if any questions pop up. And then I do have some questions that I'll be using to help kind of get us started. So with that being said, I'll kind of pop into the first question. So for anyone who wants to get started, what models or theories do you use to guide your living learning program?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I think that professionally here at USF, I know that the theory that we really use and implement with our residential curriculum is Bronfenbrenner's ecological system, sorry. And so I think that that is really instrumental in understanding that student development comes a lot from the environment. And so when we think about where we are asking student development to come from, it's coming from the residence halls, the classrooms, the environments that we build on campus. And so that's a huge theory that we align with our residential curriculum. I think that my personal student development theory that I like to use is Tinto's theory of departure. And so I've been working in living learning programs for probably 2-3 years. I came up in a living learning program, and I like Tinto's theory of departure because he essentially says students are leaving higher education, they're going back home, maybe they're going into a trade, whatever that may be, because they are not aligned and making connections at the institution. They may be doing extremely well in their classrooms, but because they cannot connect to what's going on outside the classroom, they are leaving. Well, someone who is a coordinator of academic initiatives, and I'm like, yes, thank you. Now I am affirmed that I need to make sure our students are connected other ways, which I think in turn, really living learning programs and communities play a big part.
Thanks for that, Chazman. You're bringing me back to my admission and retention class from grad school. That is one of our main theories. And that being said, I think Dr. Williams, this is a great segue for you.
You know, it's so funny. I was literally thinking that too. I was thinking, is anyone else feeling like they're preparing for their comp exams or anything right now? But, you know, I do think it's wonderful. We have so many models and theorists to guide our work. When I think about specifically the work of the students in the College of Education, the work for them in our living learning community, I really think about Aston a lot, specifically how we spoke to the influence of the peers in terms of what makes a difference in students' lives. And I can tell you, and you know, we'll get to it, I think, probably in later questions, but how we've been able to utilize peers to help influence and build the incoming first-year students specifically, but also how we've kind of designed our program to cultivate leadership skills in those upper-level students who are there. So it's kind of like a mutually beneficial system where the peers benefit one another, both the mentors and mentees, and in terms of the system we use. And I know as an institution, our overall program director of academic initiatives talks a lot about best practices in living learning programs, and you know, references, if anyone here is familiar with that, the pyramid of all of the different the base of the infrastructure leading up to the icing on the top. So I know we talk a lot about intentionally embedding those throughout everything, every decision we make related to our living learning community.
Lindsay and I are on the same wavelength because I was actually going to mention the pyramid that I believe is from Dr. Karen Inquist, where it talks about the foundation being like the infrastructure, and so the collaboration between residential education or residential life, whatever it is at your department, with academic affairs. And then also moving above that is just how are we connecting the students to academic affairs. And then I think what's really cool about that pyramid is that it talks about the mortar and the mortar in between everything that puts the icing on the pyramid is assessment. And so the continuation of assessing what it is that we're doing, how our students are feeling about being in the LLC and things like that helps us to get better so we can better service our students.
Thanks for those great answers, everyone. It all meshed together so well. I loved it. So that being said, we're going to move on to the next question. Anyone, if you do have questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. I see you all coming in. Hello from Florida State. Wow, we're sharing states. We're neighbors. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask Chazman, because we work together a lot, the next question, if she can start us off. Can you describe your relationship with academic advisors, faculty, and/or residential education staff? What strategies can you provide to ensure effective collaboration between these three components of a living learning community program?
Awesome. So when I think about the relationship that I have with our partners, our staff, and our faculty, I really like to think of them as the lifelines, and lifelines because they really preserve the LLC, right? And so we cannot have our LLCs if one of those components is missing. And so, you know, Mel and Dylan are both RLCs, and they have access to students that I may not always have, right? And I think that they can do a lot of informing me on what's going on, conduct, roommate agreements, highs and lows of their students, as opposed to like Lindsay, who is an LLC partner, who I think lately they've been doing a really great job with helping us in recruitment and giving us departmental updates. So I would say for sure the lifelines. And I think the way that we cultivate and keep those relationships alive really starts early in the summer with our training. And so each summer we train with our partners, our faculty. So we have a faculty in residence program here at the University of South Florida, and we also have a faculty fellow program. And so what we do in the summer is we get all of our faculty together, our LLC partners, and then our RLCs together in one room. And what we do is we fellowship, we talk about policies, we talk about building relationships, we do a little bit of assessment and pre-planning for the future school year. And so I think after that, you know, one thing about training is that we can't let it stop in the summer. So what we do is we have two types of training that we keep going. So we have our LLC council that meets once a month, and that's with our partners. And I love that meeting because we get to update each other. We get to really kind of sit around the table and tell each other what's going on in our LLCs, because I don't get to work with all of our LLCs. And so our partners come and they update us on what's going on, events, things that we'd like to go to. And then on the flip side of that, we have our LLC advisory boards, which compose of our RAs, and then they also have our RLCs and then our LLC partners and an AI coordinator, an academic initiatives coordinator. And that meeting really helps us sustain the relationships between the departments, but also the students. And so what I like about that is our RAs kind of give us the 411 on what's happening on the floors. And I think that's important from an assessment side, because I want to know what's going on with my students. I want to know what our student needs. I want to know what student wants are, so that I, as an AI coordinator, and our LLC partners are like, let's deliver and let's give them what they want. And so we do a lot of relationship building through the advisory board meetings and the council meetings throughout the year.
Yeah, I will say Chazman is one of my partners for one of my LLCs, and that summer training, as someone who was a new staff member this year alongside Chazman, really kind of helped solidify the vision that we had. We came up with it together with our faculty members and our LLC partners, but I think it also helped us like carry it forward throughout the year. We're like, oh yeah, we always went back to the goals that we had talked about in the beginning and talking about some of those different things that we wanted to improve from the previous year. Dylan, we had a question for you in the chat. Could you name the pyramid that you were talking about? I know it's like Inklus is the author, I believe. If you have
I will. I can just type it in. It's cool.
Awesome. While you do that, Dr. Williams, did you have anything to add to that question?
You know, what's funny is I was thinking, you know, so many times we have things that we've instituted at our institutions that we think, oh, everybody must do that. So when Chazman was mentioning that, I mean, that's so important. I think that those meetings that we have that are ongoing, in addition to the training, just shows that we have such a sense of transparency with one another. You know, I remember, because I've worked with our living learning community since 2013, and I remember saying something about, oh, I'm, you know, telling some of my colleagues, I'm going to training, you know, for the LLC in the summer, and they said, don't you know what you're doing by now? And I was like, well, it's not the same thing. It's never the same thing. And if we did the same thing, we certainly wouldn't be evolving. So I think what Chazman was talking about, how we use that time to, because there are changing parts, you know, obviously our RAs are changing, some of the professional staff members are changing. So not only to like have fellowship, like you were talking about, Chazman, but also to set those goals. And then in those regularly occurring meetings, I think it's really helpful to have like a shared template. And it doesn't have to be so prescriptive that we can't deviate from it, but we know that we are all going to address certain topics every month. And I think it helps us not only hold ourselves accountable, but also make sure that we're always on the same page. We know what we're working toward. And I also really enjoy those council meetings because I might hear something from the College of Engineering that's working really well that I would never have thought of, or something that someone else is trying, whether it's a recruitment event or something related to a program or whatever it might be. But I think through that, through all of those meetings, we just build such a rapport. Maybe Dylan thinks too much because I had a little bit of a breakdown at one meeting in the spirit of anyone who reads Brene Brown. I was very vulnerable in one meeting, and I really appreciated Dylan afterward because I wrote to him and just wanted him to know, like, I'm sorry that I did that. And he said, no, you were being vulnerable and you trust me. And I do. I trust him just completely. And I enjoy working with everyone so much. And I learned so much. And I just think that those ongoing meetings are so important. You know, we continued them throughout being remote. And it was kind of fun just to see people's faces and hear their voices as well, because I think it's something that we all enjoy doing. And I'm fortunate to enjoy the people I work with. So.
I think I agree with Lindsay. I'm fortunate enough that she is one of my LLC partners, and we get to build a relationship. I think we started working together 2 summers ago, and so through that, I think the first thing we really did was establish what type of communication would work best for us. We email, we also do have each other's phone numbers, but I think there's just like that open line of communication. Lindsay knows if a resident is having an issue, if it's housing concern or if it's vice versa, I'm able to reach out to her. And I think from that, the monthly advisory board meetings really helps establish that. And I think Lindsay said it, like, trust. I feel like I have trust with both of my LLC partners. And with that, I think trust is like a foundation of being able to learn together, being able to be vulnerable together, and even being able to be in a meeting and be like, so how can we do this? Like, this is what I want, but maybe this is a gap area of mine, and maybe there's some people on the advisory board that are able to come in and figure out how we can contribute to making the experience just 10 times better for the residents.
Thanks so much for that, Dylan. I love that you mentioned trust. I think sometimes we want to do it all and we cannot. We can't carry it all, and teamwork makes the dream work. So thank you for reminding us that. So I'm going to move it along to the next question. I'll keep reminding you all, drop any questions you might have in the chat. We'll answer those as well as we get to them. So for the next question, could you consider any innovative measures you might have implemented with students that may be like the first time you tried something new? What made them unique, and how do you think these strategies can be reimagined at another institution and maybe potentially now online if it was something that happened in person previously?
I think something that was really cool. So I get to work with Lindsay with the Education LLC that lives in my community. And then I also worked with the STEM LLC, and something that one of the RAs did, so my first year in the community with working with the STEM, they started a student interest committee. And with that, they were able to bring in returners from either to the LLC or just returners who still wanted to stay involved with the LLC. And they created a committee where they meet on a monthly basis to generate feedback. So making assessments or making surveys and sending out to the current residents living in the LLC to figure out, okay, cool, we could have did this differently, or we would like to see these type of either field trips or either speakers coming to the community. And so the first year, it was a little rocky. We weren't quite sure how to implement it because it was something that was new. And so this past school year, we were able to identify some roles. And so we had a liaison who works with the RAs more closely to divvy out tasks. And then we had different chairs. So there was people who were in charge of surveys and gathering assessment. We had people who would help with the setup for the events and things like that. And so I'm excited I was excited for the upcoming school year to kind of define it a little bit more. But unfortunately, we had to sunset the STEM LLC just due to some other things. And so, but I think that was really cool because it allowed students to buy into it. And then we actually started opening up to where some of their current residents could fill in some of the chair positions. Like if they weren't able to come to a meeting, then the current residents were able to kind of give that firsthand feedback on like how they perceived an event or what they would like to see.
Just hitting a million buttons over here. Dylan, it's so funny because in reflecting about some of the questions, I wrote down student mentor buy-in because, and you use those words exactly. We have a peer mentor committee with our students. It actually started because our community began as a first year student only. We were in a first year student resident hall. And so we, at the end of the year when we did a couple focus groups, they said, okay, well, our only complaint is what's next, which was great, right? So we realized that we could, although most of our goals are targeted toward that first year of a student's life, that transition from high school to college and identification of their major and career, we knew that we could do a lot with as it relates to leadership development, and a lot of aspiring educators do have also goals to become leaders, and I think they are in classrooms and certainly in other venues. And so we had kind of a traditional committee style where we would have a president and vice president. And then I remember hearing at a conference about the student interest committees, and we kind of modified our peer mentor committee to kind of look like that. And that all came from student feedback. So, you know, every year when there's students who apply to return, I gather them together and say, this is how we've done it, but that does not mean that's how we have to do it. So do you have any thoughts about this? We kind of explore things. They hear from friends, of course, at either our institutions or other institution. And this year we did something where instead of having traditional positions, because we recognize that some students know in the cycle of the semester that they may be busier in certain portions of the term versus others might be like, actually, no, my midterms are far. I'm really good around that time. All the students kind of identified in pairs or trios as leads to different programs or events that were ongoing. So there wasn't necessarily a social media person, and there wasn't necessarily whatever the different positions were, but there were people who worked in small groups who would lead certain events, and it actually kind of kept the momentum going throughout the entire semester. And we found that like a lot of the students really enjoyed doing things like decorating and picking out themes and those types of things. So it kind of allowed everyone to do that. But I think using upper level students, even if they don't retain in the residence hall, but you have some sort of committee with them that meets on a regular basis that can help mentor those incoming students or those first year students in whatever format your institution or your specific population allows. I think that's huge for buy-in. So I think any opportunity to do that. We have the luxury of being an academic focused living learning community. So I get with the instructors for the entry level classes that all students take. And in any of the programs that we have, I talk to them and try and figure out, okay, let's work smarter and not harder. And we know that time is a valuable commodity that not everyone has just an exponential amount of, right? So by virtue of attending certain LLC events, students will get extra credit in their courses. So if there's opportunities for shared academic coursework and you can collaborate with the faculty in that way, not trying to make it like, oh, here's a freebie, but you know, when students have decisions to make about what to do with their time, I think it makes sense to do something that's going to get the most bang for your buck, you know, and then it helps the faculty have a really solid understanding of what a living learning community is, what residential curriculum is, or the benefits of living on campus, and it just kind of becomes embedded in the culture.
Thank you. So I think one innovative measure that we have taken here at USF is we have really wanted to ensure that we are keeping up with the best practices of living learning communities. And so with that, we have a faculty fellow, Dr. Jennifer Friedman from the Department of Sociology, who came to us and said, listen, I have a daughter who goes to Brooks de Bartolo High School up the street in Tampa, and they are just so eager to get to campus. They are so eager to mingle and be mentored by college students. What can you do for us? Can you get into the high school? And so my director, Nildy, and I sat down and were like, you know what, this is a great opportunity for service learning. And so what we did is at Brooks de Bartolo, they have a Students of Color Association. And when we linked up with their partner, Miss Mitchell, she said, I don't exactly want just students of color because I don't want to limit the information that you're providing to my students. I want students who can come and give them information on higher education, how to get involved in the community, and really how to transition. And so we said, okay, what living learning communities do we think will best work with our Students of Color Association? And so we took our Student Support Services living learning community, whose students were like, we want to get out in the community. We want to mentor. We want to help students the way that we were mentored. And then we also took our Honors LLC, who is a large group of students who we knew had just the energy and the want to get out in the community. And so with the Service Learning Initiative, we went once bi-weekly, and we mingled with the students. We let them ask some questions. But I think my favorite part about this initiative is we got to go serve the Tampa Bay community. And so I think what was innovative about this is that a lot of times at higher education institutions, we don't know how to get our students off campus, right? We don't know how to get them partnered with the community. We partner real well on campus, but we want to mingle and do things in the community. And so we do a lot of serving to our students, and they do a lot of serving on campus. But this time we got to go Feed Tampa Bay, which is an initiative to go and feed people who are food insecure in Tampa. And our students got to, one, mingle with each other. So our SSS LLC and our honors students got to come together. But we also got to engage with some global citizenship, which is also a pillar in our residential curriculum. So aligning that service learning with our residential curriculum was also important, but also, you know, meeting the needs of our students, because learning's a two-way street, right? And so our students here on campus went and taught the students at SOCA, but SOCA was also able to give back to the students in a way that they could, that they may have not gotten on campus. And so I think service learning is extremely important as we look at the pillars of our curriculum and the current climate that's going on in the world. So partnering with the community, I think, is the best initiative that we could do.
Thanks for that, Chazman. That's an awesome segue into our next question. There is a question that someone added in the chat. I think for our living learning programs here, the ones that are academically focused, they have a common course, but we don't necessarily in residential education oversee the common course. And so we don't create syllabuses and things like that, or syllabi. We do have a kind of agreement that we work through with our LLC partners that has like different expectations and things like that. And we do talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in there, but we don't have a syllabus per se. Chazman, you can feel free to touch on that if you want. But for those of you that are listening in, if you do have something that you want to share with us, feel free to drop it in the chat. So the question says, again, for the academically grounded LLCs, does anyone have a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement on their syllabus, and can you share? Thank you, Anna, for that question. So I'll bring it back up in case anyone pops up anything else. Chazman, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, awesome. Anna, thank you for your question. So like Mel alluded to, we don't technically have syllabuses in our academically grounded living learning communities, but I think a diversity and inclusion statement goes two ways. And so we do hit on that in our residential curriculum, which is what we use to align the academic curriculum of our living learning communities. And so we do hit on that in our residential curriculum. And then on the other side of that is with our LLCs, we do have memorandums of understanding. And so with what we use, and okay, so our memorandums of understandings are the other side of how we kind of hold our departments and our LLC partners accountable. And so those are the two tools that we use in those statements to kind of make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are statements that are included, and that isn't something that's overlooked. And we also do a lot, so with our diversity, equity, and inclusion, we do a lot with the global citizens aspect and pillar in our residential curriculum. And so as we move into the next question, how have you aligned academic curriculum with scaffolded student engagement? Global citizenship is a huge part of that. And then through our curriculum, we have different pillars that you can hit and learning outcomes that are aligned with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thanks, Chazman. So for all of the panelists, I'll repeat the question that Chazman started. So how have you aligned the academic curriculum with a scaffolded student engagement approach to ensure student learning? How do you tailor living learning programs to meet the ever-evolving needs of residential students?
I'll jumpstart us off, and then some of the things I'm going to talk about will touch on to maybe some things that Dr. Williams is going to mention. So I'll give her the opportunity to add anything with that. So for us, I work with the other academic initiatives coordinator for my LLCs. And so in the summer, once we have the curriculum, what we typically do, we'll sit down together and we bring in the curriculum binder, and then also with Lindsay, for an example, they'll bring in some of the things that the peer mentor group has already come up with for the semester. And so we go through the lesson plans that are happening during the fall semester of like, well, this is what's going on for around October for this community gathering or with these intentional conversations. And then we are able to look at some of the events and things that the peer mentor group has already planned. And then we're able to be like, okay, cool, this will fit in, or what do you think some of the learning outcomes are going to be for this event that the peer mentors have selected? Okay, cool. This aligns with week 3 of our curriculum because it's all about interpersonal skills. And there's an event that the Education LLC does about speed friending and things like that. And so opportunity of how to work with people who are different with you and learning people who are different from you. And so I think it starts at the beginning of the summer. And then of course, during the fall semester, we're able to hash out what's going to happen in the spring semester. And what I really like about that is we're able to take already do some of the assessment that's happening in the fall to make some changes maybe, or really think about what we want to do. I think something that stood out for me this past school year is that we were able to get more feedback from our residents in the STEM LLC about what events they wanted to see. And so we were able to go to Busch Gardens and take a tour of the vet hospital that they have on site. And so they were able to learn about animals, and we were able to kind of just like see what the surgery room looks like and just get some of those behind the scenes info, and they absolutely loved it. And I think we were able to do that because the RAs and the student interest committee was really able to get some feedback and really figure out what it was that the residents wanted to do that allowed them to learn.
I agree with everything that Dylan said. I think in the College of Education, we are in a fortunate position to have aspiring educators as our resident assistants. So the idea of lesson planning and scaffolding the learning and, just even planning in advance is not something that is unknown to them. It's something they're very comfortable with and what they're learning in their coursework. And to kind of speak again to what has already been talked about, when we have our planning in the summer and we have these ongoing meetings, it allows us to get ahead of the game, right? So we can plan these events looking at events that we've had in the past that have been traditions that have really worked well, and seeing if maybe we want to retain those or adjust them a little bit, and then where they fit within the residential curriculum, because not in the Education LLC, for example, it's not a huge secret that the entire country is striving to get educators. Education is not necessarily a field of really high interest. But so we often have non-LLC members on our floor. So our goal is never for our resident assistant to have to essentially double the work. So we want to try to see what programs can we have that align with the residential curriculum so that you can kind of, do one program that meets both needs, the needs of us in terms of the partner and the LLC experience, and also the needs of all the residents. And we've always welcomed any non-LLC members who live on the floor to our events. It's kind of funny because some people thought that this one gentleman was an actual LLC student, and they're like, I just found out that he's getting ready to graduate and he's an engineering major. I was like, yeah, he just hangs out with us all the time. He lived on our floor the first year. So anyway, I think, by nature, a lot of students are welcoming to others. So I think it lends itself well to that. But I think the planning in advance, the looking at the, if you don't have a residential curriculum, but you have, the life cycle of a student and what can be, expected in throughout the year. And I also take my syllabus for my course and try to make sure that my assignments align with that residential curriculum as well. So that when they're in my class and we're talking about something, they're hearing it again in the residence hall, and it's kind of making more sense. I think it validates it. They are getting more buy-in because like, oh, I'm hearing this in multiple places. It seems to make a lot of sense. So I think that, planning is just so key. And then when the students have these great ideas, like, oh, I just heard about this, can we add this? Our hair isn't on fire because we already have everything else essentially planned. So adding something else becomes exciting and not stressful.
Awesome. So when I think about how we align the academic curriculum with scaffolded student engagement, I think of first the concept of experiential learning. And so what am I doing to make sure that students are getting experiences or having events that are reinforcing really what they're learning in the classroom, just outside of the classroom? And so the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is how we set up our educational plan. Dylan alluded a little bit that with our residential curriculum, each week is aligned and themed to make sure that it's matching with the events of what's going on in higher education or what's going on in alignment with the institution and themes that students are going through in higher education. I would say the next thing that I think about is that with our educational plan, something that is really cool is that what we're doing is we're also paying attention to the current events that are going on outside of exactly what's happening at USF. And so something that we've just planned is we've planned a Real Talk series leading up to Election Day, because this is an election year. And so in our Real Talk series, I know that they'll be talking a little bit about election and the politics in the classroom, but how can we make sure that we're enforcing that learning? So what we do is we're using a Real Talk series, which is a really informal way for us to talk about some hot topics with students as they are, reinforcing the importance of voter registration or, the social justice aspects of, the privilege of voting and what it means to put a candidate in office. And so I think that also one thing that's really important when we think about how we tailor our living learning programs to meet the needs of ever evolving students is, I think it starts with our training, right? And so Lindsay and Dylan both have mentioned the best practice inventory in the model, the triangle model. And so that model has 4 different levels. And so as we look at what we've done in previous years, this is kind of a little bit of the assessment pieces. We've looked at our best practice inventory and seen, how are we tailoring what we're doing in our events to meet student engagement. And so a lot of the signature events that we do is maybe dinner with the deans, right? Or I know that with our Men of Excellence initiative, we've made sure to be intentional about the study groups that we've aligned with finals week and finals review. And so I think to meet the needs of ever evolving students, I think that we should talk about the different pieces of assessment that we're doing in our LLCs. And so we do assessment in a few different ways, specifically in our council, in our advisory board meetings. But I think to meet the needs of ever evolving students is making sure that you're reinforcing learning outside of the classroom. And so I think that that's where your interpersonal relationships with your students begin. And as those relationships begin, I think that you get to understand their needs. And so, Lindsay talked about how she had a student who was in his senior year, but he was still hanging out. And it's because that relationship was built and they were doing experiential activities outside of the classroom to reinforce that learning. And so other things that we've done to make sure that we're scaffolding learning for student engagement is, I know that our Bulls business community and our Zimmerman advertising living learning community is really big on field trips. And so the ZAP LLC, they take a lot of field trips to these ad agencies. And so we're keeping these students engaged outside with these big execs at these agencies. A lot of students get internships, or, you know, they make the connections to classroom learning at these big agencies. And so really thinking about how can we be unique, but also reinforcing the learning that they're having in the classroom.
Thanks for that, all of you all. Great answers, lots of information. Looping back to Lydia's question about assessment, Chazman and Dylan touched on it both as well. The next question is about assessment. I serve on our assessment committee, so I'm going to feel free to share some tidbits that I have for you as well. So the question we had prepared, and feel free to add more, Lydia, if you had more questions than what it is. Consider sharing some data or assessment that you use to inform your practice. How do you use data to share your story with stakeholders and campus partners? So Chazman mentioned that we do assessment early and often here, and we also use like anecdotal data from our students and things like that from experiences that they've had. We use a few different pieces to collect data from student. One is intentional conversations. And so if you were at our first session that happened with Paul Gordon Brown, he talked about intentional conversations briefly. And so in that space, we can collect that data and hear student stories and experiences that they're having during specific time periods in the semester, and see if the curriculum that we have planned makes sense at that point in time, so that for the next year, we can edit that if it doesn't. So if we're talking about wellness in week 2, but in week 1, they're already like, oh, you know, I'm having trouble creating a plan for myself, we know, okay, we have to adjust that for the upcoming year or whatever that may look like. We also have conducted focus groups for our living learning community, and our assessment committee has held that. And so we kind of did half of them one year and then half of them the next year, just because of the capacity for us to do it all. And with those, we were able to like invite students, a certain amount of them to come, and then we were able to kind of transcribe that data, look for themes, etc. And then we share that information with our partners, and then they're able to, with all of the kind of people that work with the LLC, so the residential education staff, faculty, and the LLC partner, decide on what to do with that information. So it might be making updates for the future, removing a certain initiative, editing it, etc. And then embedded in our residential curriculum, for each lesson plan, there is typically an assessment tool. So sometimes that looks like a 3-2-1 card. So like, tell me 3 things you learned, 2 things that you want to like do more about in the future, and 1 thing that you're going to tell your roommate, or whatever the questions might look like for the 3-2-1 card. It might look like a QR code for a link to a survey. So they look different to kind of make sure the students don't get like survey fatigue, but that's embedded in our curriculum. So we create these lesson plans in mind, knowing that we are going to collect this information. And then later we loop back with our professional staff and ask them, oh, what are some things that you heard from your RAs or your community managers? How are they feeling? What feedback did they get from students? And so we're getting those data points from different areas and putting that all together to move forward and make changes as needed. So I hope that answered your question, Lydia. Dylan, Chazman, Dr. Williams, feel free to jump in on any other data points and assessment tools that you might be thinking about.
I didn't know if you were going to say something, Chazman. I thought I saw you unmute. Do you want to go first?
You did. You can go first, and then I'll come back behind you.
Sure. Okay. I was just going to say some of the data points we collect, and if your institution like ours is focused on performance-based metrics, then they're no surprise to you, but we look at specifically our students in our living learning community, and for the sake of essentially recruitment purposes, we compare those to students who are education majors but not in our living learning community. And then we also look at across the entire student population just generally. So we look at things like 4-year graduation rates, obviously. We look at 1st to 2nd year retention, and I was like thrilled this year when I saw that we have 100% of 1st, 2nd year retention. Now our numbers are small, we're in the 20s, but we're still, really excited about that. We look at their GPA. So the GPA of our first year students in the middle of a pandemic, at the end of their first year, was a 3.67. And I just think that's really remarkable. We also look, and there are certainly across different majors and different professions, probably something similar, but for those pursuing a profession in teaching, they have to take certain certification exams. And so we also look at the first time pass rates of our LLC students on the Florida Teacher Certification exam and compare that to others as the way to kind of help encourage the students and their families and guests and supporters in their lives who might encourage them to, when they're making decisions about higher education, to say, if you can have a community, because we already know Aston talked about how your peer group is the single largest influence, why not surround yourself with a group of peers who year after year have demonstrated these amazing things academically? But also we want to hear anecdotally, like, but did you enjoy it? Did you have a good time? Did you feel as though you were cared about? And we hear that year after year as well. We also, because the class that I teach is in the fall, so toward the end of the term every year, I try to gain feedback. I mean, you can get some things from course evaluations, of course, but I like to hear what they'll say. And I think because of the rapport I try really hard to build with them, they tend to be vulnerable with me. Probably helped that we read Dare to Lead by Brene Brown as part of our textbook this year. So I think that they understood the importance of being honest with other people. But we talk about the assignments, what we read, all of the discussions we had, what can we do, what can we change? And then we take what they say, and then we build seminars. And actually that naming convention was decided upon by the students. We didn't really know, is a seminar going to sound too, oh, I don't want to do a seminar, I already have enough academic focus. But they actually said, no, we like the legitimacy that word gives. And so we would have bi-weekly seminars that were held in the residence hall that would address the topics that we didn't address in the class, but that the students indicated they wanted to. So that's, if you don't have a common course connected with your living learning community or your program, a lot of times that can be a way to kind of ensure that continued connection with it. And if you pull in not only collaboration from partners across the institution, but also your upper level students. And again, I recognize we're from education. So if you ask upper level students, do you want to teach a lesson or a workshop? They're going to say, yeah, I can do it with my eyes closed, but they get excited about it. So that's definitely something that we do to kind of use that data and then build on after it, and we can do it as we're going throughout the academic year. So I think that's really important to make sure that the students know that we are listening to them, that they're, for our LLC, it's fee funded. So, there's a financial component there. And so we want to make sure that they know that we are doing our best to meet their needs within reason, of course. And it's funny because, well, I don't know if funny is the right word, but I'm very fortunate because so many students from March until yesterday have texted, emailed, tried to FaceTime. And I'm like, for the love of, please do not FaceTime me at 11:30 at night, people. But anyway, they have talked about, you know what, Lindsay, why don't you do this in your class next year? They're still thinking of ideas. And I love that they are so innovative and exciting. And it makes me excited because those are the future educators in our country. But I think to feel that they know that their, institution really cares about them and their opinion and is taking, how many times have you filled out a survey and like, are you even doing anything with this? But to know that we're taking action on their responses, I think lets them know that they don't get that survey fatigue, right? That they're like, oh, you actually are reading this, you're going to do something about it. So I think that's helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Lindsay hit on some great points. So the first thing I want to say is that as scholarly practitioners, we are a data-driven department. And so we do not try to make decisions without data and assessment. And so the first thing that I think was extremely helpful for me when I first got here, and I think that helps us plan for the future, is every LLC partner submits an end of the year report. And so in that end of the year report, some of the things that you will see in that is you'll see programs that they did for the academic year. You'll see the successes and challenges that happened within the LLC. We'll talk a little bit about where we can improve. And so we did do the best practice inventory this year that really helped us talk about where we wanted to improve next year upon reflection of the previous academic year. And so then we talk a little bit about some of the assessment outcomes that we have in our end of the year report. And so one thing we talk about are academic or educational gains. So we talk about retention rates, higher grades, and stronger results related to learning outcomes than peers. And then we also talk a little bit about GPA and progress toward graduation comparison within an LLC versus non-LLC student. And so those numbers are really important for us as we ask for GPA checks from partners, because we use that data to take it to the Retention and Persistence Committee here at the University of South Florida. So we're, Lindsay talked a little bit about how are we tracking our students as they persist through the next 4 years, or however long it may take them to graduate. And so we really take a close look at GPA and how long it's really taking them to get there. And so we also consider in our LLC program, prospective students as stakeholders. And so we use GPA data, we use retention data in our marketing, because we want our future students to understand that what we're doing is we're not doing it to just do it, but here's the data. And so for an example is, I just completed a calling campaign and I use the data pieces to recruit students. And so some of the data pieces that I'll use is that for our first time in college students, our average GPA for all LLC students is a 3.5, and our retention of first to second year is 95% in the LLC community. And so that's higher than the non-LLC students at the University of South Florida. So I always use that as a recruitment piece for students who are coming into the LLC as stakeholders. And then one thing that I'd like to touch base on, hopefully this doesn't step on Dylan's toes, is that our STEM students have major retention from first to second year in the 96th percentile. And so I think that that's really important when we talk about our assessment and how, what we do as data-driven professionals is that we make these decisions for, the next year based on those numbers. And I think that it's important that, when you say you're going to do something, or when you conduct an assessment, to use the information that you get from the assessment. And so here at the University of South Florida, we use that in planning. We use that in the Persistent and Retention Committee to plan for the next year, and also show that these students as stakeholders, current and future students, are really out here making this program very robust and unique, and really kind of showing that the program is working.
Cool. Yeah, I think Chazman did a good job of touching on the STEM students, as well as Dr. Williams touching on the education. And I think when we're looking small scale, so with the Student Interest Committee that I worked with the STEM LLC, assessment for them was basically just assessing the events or the field trips that we had. So the Busch Gardens example that I talked about, we call it SIC for short, so Student Interest Committee. They created a survey, and so what happens is they come up with questions that they want to know about the event, and then they'll send it to me, and then I'll look at it. I'll know some things that I want to know, or that we want to know with the advisory board, and so rephrase this question. Also, we should be asking this question. Have we thought about what it would look like to ask this question? And so they're students, and so they may not be knowing exactly the full picture of assessment, but the good thing is that we're getting, I'm able to understand what it is that they want to know about events, and then I'm also able to give them, because I also will attend those SIC meetings when they are going over the survey and ready to send it out, of okay, cool, so this is what we want to know, because the partner that we worked with for STEM was Dr. Pollins, and this is what I know Dr. Pollins is going to want to know, or this is what the AI team is going to want to know. And so I want to make sure that we have that information to paint a full picture of why we want to go back to Busch Gardens again, and things like that.
Wow, so many things. Thank you, everyone. That was my favorite answer. I love assessment. And we're gonna move on to the next question. We have just under 10 minutes left. There are a couple questions. If anyone is having some burning questions out in the audience, feel free to drop them in the chat now to make sure that we can get to those. Lydia, I hope that answered your question. If there was something else you wanted to know, feel free to ask. So moving it along, how have you garnered buy-in and sustained interest in your program? What strategies can you share with others? I think you've touched on this like already throughout, but if you all have anything else to add, feel free.
I think the best way to create buy-in and sustained interest in your program is to do what you say you're going to do. And so I think that the most important part is that I know that sometimes, or when I invest in something, I'm always looking for a return on my investment. And so I think that as an AI coordinator, I'm always thinking, how can I make sure that my students get return on their investment? And so I think that when we tell them about these, data pieces and these GPA pieces and the wonderful programs that we're doing, that those are the things that we actually do. Because in an LLC, when I recruit my students, what I'm telling them is that if you join this LLC, this is an experience you cannot get should you not participate. Like, you cannot go anywhere else and get this experience. And so I think that the best way to create buy-in and sustain interest is doing what I say that I'm going to do. And so if that's creating a phenomenal dinner with the deans and getting the deans from the College of Arts and Science or the College of Education here to come have donuts with you or have lunch with you, then that's what I'm going to do. Or if that's saying, you know what, service learning is a best impact practice, let me go out into the community and finding things for you to do. And so our ROTC Live and Learn community also did a little bit of service learning as well. And then I think also too, when you think about sustained interest, I think that you should also talk about a little bit about what are your next steps. And so Dr. Williams hit a little bit about how sometimes first year students are like, I had a great experience. What am I supposed to do next? So in order to create buy-in and sustain interest, I think that you have to be intentional about what their opportunities are after they leave the LLC. And so a lot of our live and learning communities have mentor opportunities. Rising Health Professionals Live and Learning Community, our Education Live and Learning Community, a lot of our honors live and learning community all have second year opportunities that maybe do a little bit different things. And so they do like career exploration, internship, resume building. So they do next steps, but I think that you sustain them by listening to their ever evolving needs, as we talked about earlier, but also giving them what they want and returning on their investment.
I agree with what Chazman said. And I think the only thing that I would add from my perspective is the RAs that we hire to be in those positions for the LLC are really big. And for me, I usually go in with the perspective of it's nice to have someone who was in the LLC so they can speak to the opportunity, because if they're applying and they're expressing their interest in wanting to be a part of the LLC, obviously the LLC really meant something to them, and they're going to help build that buy-in with the residents that they're serving. And so for the STEM LLC, there's so many people that are so many STEM majors, and so there is the first year that I was working with the STEM LLC, I had one RA who experienced the STEM LLC and then one RA who didn't, and that RA grew so close to like the LLC that like she also bought into it. And I just think I think one, if they've been through it, it works, but also with the STEM LLC, that one RA who didn't go through the STEM LLC, but she saw how impactful that it was for the residents, she also bought into it. So I think if you have your RAs bought into the LLC, that will help sustain the residents.
I was just going to say one quick thing about getting buy-in. Is all of that data that you collect, share it. That was something that when we did that, the evaluation, using the best practices in living learning programs, when we were talking about, oh, do you do this? Do you do this? Yes, yes, yes. Oh, where do you tell people about that? And so sending an annual report to, our college leadership or to the academic initiatives team is wonderful. But, like Chazman said, say that when you're calling people, put that out on your website, put it in your marketing brochures, because that's where, if you need funding, you can always pull, I think it's nice to be able to say, hey, here's the impact, and I can show you. So, don't keep it to yourself. Tell everyone who'll listen about it, how great it is.
I also think I would be remiss if I did not mention a way to create buy-in and sustained interest is to make sure that you are intentional and strategic on who you choose to partner with for your living learning communities. And so I think that a lot of the work that we do, our partners are a huge contributor to that. And so, right now we are in the point where we are filling beds for the next year. And I know that my partners are doing their own calling campaigns. They're sending out their own marketing. They're reaching out to students. And so I think that when you think about buy-in, having a partner who, like Lindsay, is answering those FaceTime calls, who goes beyond just the traditional model of academic advising is extremely important because, students are here to get an academic education. Like, I really understand that, but they also want to create relationships. And so having a partner who goes to your events, as simple as that sounds, is you want an LLC partner who not only just goes to your events, but they show up, right? They're at the table saying, you know what, my students have this interest. They're advocating for the needs of their student. I think creates a sustained buy-in from your students, because having a partner and an AI coordinator and RLC that you can truly rely on to not just be there but show up, I think speaks volumes to students, because it goes back to that component of trust from the beginning, and then also really believing in your program. So I know that if I see everyone showing up, okay, I'm showing up too, right? And if I see everyone pouring their heart into this program and being intentional about programming and being strategic about having a certain dean at this table, I think really shows an interest, and again, goes back to the conversation of return of investment.
Thank you for that, Chazman. And part of having great partners is being a great partner, and I will never forget that. Be there for your partners. So we have one last question. It is, what initiatives or new engagement strategies did you implement within your living learning programs to support student engagement in the current blended learning environment? Share some of your engagement and what it looked like during COVID-19. How have you sustained students in this new digital space?
That's like the $1 million question, right? How are we all going to do that, and what's it going to look like as we move forward? I think part of it is what we've all talked about. We've spent a year, or almost a year, developing a relationship, showing them that we're there for them. When I was an undergraduate and I lived in the residence halls, I knew my RA's first name. It was a very different experience, but I had no idea that there was some, like, his boss. It's so funny because our student, they're like, Dylan, they love you. Alana probably FaceTimes you. I get it. Like, they know you all because you're there and they know you care about them, which I think is wonderful. So I think that having built that rapport is so important, so that when you are in a remote environment, they have the credibility there. So we did a couple Netflix parties. So because we all read Brene Brown as our class, our book, in the fall, we watched her Netflix documentary together. Those Netflix parties are pretty cool. You can pause it and have a chat and those types of things. We had a Zoom end of the year event. We had a couple of different situations, like using Zoom, where we would pull in. One time it was from our campus's success and wellness coaching to talk about emotional well-being. And then another time it was actually my college roommate, who's now a clinical psychologist, who focuses on anxiety in adolescence. So she talked about anxiety related to COVID. So this was back in at the beginning of April. So, I think trying to do the best we can with having live experiences, because I think even when we're talking about our residential curriculum, that there's a purpose for having passive experiences or asynchronous experiences, and not every student can attend to certain things at certain times. I get that, so I think finding out what students want, what they are hoping to get from being it's going to be so tough moving forward, because potentially so many of their courses are going to be online, and that is a true fatigue if you're staring at a screen for so long. So I know I'll be looking for any sort of resource I can find with how I can enhance that community that we've built for so long. But I'll tell you that I think having students there who are returning as mentors is going to really, really be key in that, kind of helping them feel like they have a community. But if anyone has ideas, just put them in the chat and I'll be sure to implement them.
Oh, Chazman, go ahead.
Okay. So for my team, so we have two different types of live and learning communities. So we have fee funded and non-fee funded. And so when COVID-19 hit, it was kind of like March. And so we were in the middle of a semester. And so we really had to think about, what are we going to do for our fee funded students who have paid this fee to make sure that they are getting everything they need in an experience of experiential learning and co-curricular, just love, okay? And then so on the flip end of that, we had our non-fee funded LLC students who we think deserve the same type of experience. And so what we did is we tried to think about what are students gonna want, even though they are looking at a computer screen for all their classes and all of their needs, right? So one thing we had to think about is, how do I make sure that students see this as an engagement opportunity that's not just another online opportunity? And so what so what our department did is, in alignment with our residential curriculum, is we came up with our online platform called Bulls in the Cloud. And so what Bulls in the Cloud does is it's a Canvas course for students living on campus with us. So all of our Live and Learn community students, plus our residential students, to come and engage with us as if we were in person. So one thing that we did specifically, we started out with were academic success hours. And so we talked a lot about what does it look to go to a course pass or fail? How do you prepare for a virtual finals review? And how do you make sure that you are, wellness is one of our pillars in our residential curriculum. How do you make sure that you're well? Essentially, right? And then we also did a topic of virtual service learning, because essentially it's where we want to next shift in our best practices to make sure service learning is in all of our LLCs. So something else that we also did is that we did faculty EA, come get the tea from our faculty, with our faculty and residents. And so, what we didn't want is that once we shifted to Bulls in the Cloud, that you did not get that interaction with faculty, because that's what we promise our students as they participate in LLCs. And so we had a lot of great conversations. Dr. El Radi came and talked about the RNA of COVID-19, which was a really great conversation because it's not DNA, it's RNA. Right? Learning goes both ways. So I was also learning, but we also talked with Dr. McKoy, who is a faculty in residence, and he's also an instructor in the College of Public Health, of how do I prepare as a future practitioner for a pandemic. And so we did a really great job of faculty hours. We also did some wellness faculty hours. So Dr. Cross and Dr. Pirtle came in and really talked about what was going on in their lives. They were super personal. I know Dr. Pirtle talks about how to make a lotion. And so those are things that students want to hear. They don't always want to be bombarded with some of the academic components, since everything had transitioned online. And then also I would say what we did to engage specifically LLC students is each LLC picked specific Fridays to engage with their students. And so we were sending students articles and having discussion boards for students to engage in. I know the ROTC LLC shifted their in-person panels to online. And so what we did is we really tried to find ways to make sure that students weren't missing out despite COVID-19. So what we couldn't bring to them in person, we brought to them online via Bulls in the Cloud through our Canvas page.
The only thing that I'll add, because Chazman did touch on the Bulls in the Cloud, is within the sections, the STEM LLC was able to adjust to online discussions as well, where the topics revolved around COVID-19. They're STEM majors, and so obviously this was something that piqued their interest. And so Dr. Pollins, the faculty member who works with the LLC, was able to post TED Talks and articles about COVID-19. And at the time when this was happening. It was the evolution of COVID-19, like how is it transmitted by person to person and things like this. And then they were able to have a discussion with Dr. Poppins. And a lot of the STEM residents that I have in my community, they want to be doctors or they want to do research. And so this was the opportunity where they were kind of able to ask Dr. Poppins questions and some real life hands-on what if questions, what if this happens, and just getting a better understanding. And I really believe the STEM students knew a little bit more than like the media did. I was like, oh, and so they were very educated. Either they were doing some self research or talking to their professors, because our students are high achieving and they are interested in wanting to like, how is this going to relate to my career moving forward? And so they were able to ask questions to their professors and stop in and talking, either going to the session or before we dismissed for COVID-19, when it was like, coming our way, they were like, yeah, this could be pretty bad, this, XYZ, and it takes this long. And I was like, okay, cool, thank you.
Awesome. So that was our last question. Thank you, panelists, for all the great information. I know I learned a lot and I work with you all, so thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you to RoomPact for being with here and making this possible. And thanks everyone for being here. Like Naomi said, if you didn't see, she posted her email in the chat. If you have any other questions we didn't get to, or maybe you got a little shy and you didn't want to ask, feel free to email us. We are here for you, and we appreciate you being here. There is another session next week, like Nelly said. Join us there. And that's all for today. You can follow up on the presentation online as well if you want to share it with colleagues or anything like that. RoomPact is going to put that online. So thanks, everyone. I'll stay on for a second if anyone has anything else to add.